Hi, my name's gwEm and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I have a very special guest at the gwEmbassy. I've got Niamh Houston, better known as Chipzel, who is a game soundtrack composer and a chiptune musician from Northern Ireland. If you've not heard of her before, some of the soundtracks she's done include Super Hexagon and Dicey Dungeons, and I've put a bunch of her music in the description, so check that out. I think Niamh has a very inspiring point of view, and I think you'll dig this interview as well. We had a chat, didn't we, a few months ago on a little Discord thing for a bit of chiptune, and I was sat pretty much where I'm sitting now, actually, and you just called me up and we had a bit of a chin wag.
Yeah.
And I just quite enjoyed it, so I thought, what a shame that we didn't record any of that, because I thought it was quite good stuff. And
yeah, it was. We chatted a bit about chip history and how the scene has changed, and yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a monumental time.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about the chip history stuff. So you came into 8-Bit Collective originally.
Yeah.
But were you into music at all before then?
Yeah, so it was kind of like so I played violin when I was a kid. I hated it because I wasn't very good at it. And violin is one of those instruments where you really need to be good at it before you kind of start to like it. Because it's not quite the same when you're just like, you know? But then in my teen years, started listening to I don't know, alternative music and emo music and stuff, but then I found a CD in my dad's work van that belonged to someone that he worked with, and it was all trance classics.
Oh, great.
And so I found this, and I'm like, what is this?
It must have been heady stuff, right?
And then so suddenly my whole perspective changes. I'm like, I love fucking dance music. It's great. And then just it started to, I would have played a bit of piano, a bit of guitar and stuff like that, all self-taught. But I was really interested in making dance music on my own. Mm-hmm. And so I downloaded Fruity Loops demo and was like, this is fun, I have no idea what I'm doing. Oh, this software costs 160 quid or something at the time, and I was 13 or 14.
So it was a bit punchy back then.
And so I actually had a job when I was 14 working in a corner shop, but I was getting paid £3 an hour. So it was kind of, that was never going to do much. Yeah. So yeah, whenever I came across, so I was literally just trailing the internet looking for new music on Last.fm, and then Saber Pulse came up.
Oh wow, great!
So this is from my previous search engines of Tetris remixes and Eurodance, Game Boy and Super Nintendo sounds and stuff, and then so this comes up and I'm like, oh, this isn't a remix. What exactly is this? Because it sounds like it's all original material and stuff. And then anyway, through that I then go on his MySpace page, and then through that I see more recommendations. One of them was Sasquatch, and then Sasquatch, I messaged him and was just like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then he gave me a bit of advice, and I think it was him that sent me to 8-Bit Collective. And then from 8-Bit Collective, I started to read more about you get a card, you do this. I was like, brilliant, I can do what I'm looking for, but in a really cool niche fashion. And yeah, the whole the fact that there was just this huge scene was just...
Yeah, it's quite special when you first kind of come into it, isn't it? Because people are quite welcoming, I think.
Yeah.
So your first attempts, I guess, did they go down well, or how did people react?
I don't know if I actually put my first song on there mostly, and I think if I didn't, it's probably because I had no idea how to record it. So that was a whole other learning experience. You had to figure out how to actually record from Game Boy into the computer. But yeah, once I started to upload some stuff, it was getting a good reception. And I started to make friends, as in people that would be that would add me on MySpace or MSN, sorry. And that was fun, but I found myself in in Bro Haven, if you will.
Yeah, there was a lot of guys in chiptune, well, actually in music in general, but...
Yeah. And so there was a lot of the whole kind of like I was like the only woman in this like huge MSN chat, and you know I was always the butt of the joke, and like you know I would have to have like thick skin or whatever and just be like ha 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 lol me, yeah, I should be in the kitchen, ha ha ha. That's funny.
So how did you deal with that? You just kind of laughed it off and just moved on. Do you think...
It was a different time as well, and I'm not saying that it was okay because it definitely wasn't. Like I internalized a lot of that stuff still, even though I was okay to go along with the joke and stuff. But it normalized it very early on. But then, unfortunately, my experience on 8-Bit Collective started to switch to be quite negative. They introduced the weekly chart. So my little goal was like, I'm going to get on the weekly chart. I'm going to do it. And then I get there, and then suddenly the whole experience starts to change because it's like, oh, this is just like... She's just ripping off like Unicorn Kid and blah blah blah, and I'm like, are we not all ripping off each other here? Is this not kind of like...
Yeah, I mean every music is ripping off some other music in a way. Do you think that you know you got people didn't like it because you were a woman and you got to number one and they were somehow offended by that?
Yep. And it was only a small number of people, but they made their point be heard. You know, so it's kind of like, you know, I would go on forums and stuff, and I mean, like you would search just to see like what are people saying, and you know, at the start it was like, oh, interesting, you know, woman from Ireland and stuff. It would start off quite healthy, and then after things started to turn, it was just like, oh, you know, like she only gets shows because she's a woman and she's just being like tokenized and like being put on the lineup just to fill the slot and make it look as if the place is inclusive and all this kind of stuff. And then I was like, okay, I think I've had enough of 8-Bit Collective. I'm just going to do my own thing.
But that must have been around the time it was kind of going down anyway, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And is that when you started to like do your game soundtracks?
No, so I just kind of went off and I like... The 8-Bit Collective thing just kind of made me go, right, can't be arsed with the whole community aspect online especially. So I kind of just kept the people that were friends, you know, and just sort of stayed in contact with them. Just continued on releasing my own stuff. Got like physical copies of like my first album made and stuff and sold them on... What did I use mostly? Probably Myspace to sort of like promote everything at the time. And then Bebo as well.
Okay, well that's, dates it quite nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I had a pretty nice, I had a really good advantage wherein the city that I went to school in Northern Ireland, in Derry, had a community arts centre which would have local acts playing every Friday, and it would be an underage night, which is a really good system for getting people on the stage.
Yeah.
So take note, Chiptune.
My first gig was a under 18s night actually.
And then it'll always draw a crowd because under 18s
kids want a party, right?
Exactly. So I would have like videos of, you know, I'm like 16, 17 years old or something, and like managed to fill out like a 400, 500 person venue, and people are loving it because like it's an underage night and there's no alcohol.
I'm sure they found ways to lubricate themselves.
Literally, yeah. So that worked really well for me because then I was able to put those videos on like Bebo and stuff, and then you know people would invite me to come and play shows because they saw that I can obviously like work a crowd.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think that boosted your confidence with the negativity on 8-Bit Collective, and then you're playing a gig and people are lapping it up?
Yeah, but this was the thing that I then, you know, because I was kind of a little bit, because I still for some reason saw like, oh, but I've had these shows in Northern Ireland, but I've never had a show in England. And England is like. At the time I'm like, that's where all the interesting stuff is happening, but I'm also like at the same time simultaneously looking at some of the shows that are happening around England, and there's like 5 people. And so I was like, anyway, but I still had this as like a small goal. But what I experienced was that the majority of the time that I actually attended a show where there would be more chiptune people, it was just completely different experience. And these people had like some of the people that were probably the most like horrible about me online just like shied away completely, complete introverts. And I was like, well,
yeah, they were keyboard warriors, I guess, in the end.
the only thing that was sort of negative about then doing more shows is that it was like I was still like a 17-year-old having to travel.
It's sometimes hard to get into venues when you're underage as well. You kind of have to sneak in even if you're playing.
Yeah, I had that problem at Blip Festival where it was because they were serving alcohol and stuff. It was technically like over 21s.
Was that the first time you played in America?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. It must have been amazing.
Oh, it's terrifying. So I flew to Newark, and then so this is my first time to the States. The border control scared the hell out of me. Yeah. I finally get in. So I just started university at this point, and I was broke. Like completely. So I go to America for 4 days with $150 in my pocket. I land at the airport. My phone doesn't work, so I can't like contact anyone back home to let them know that I've got there safe. Like I think I was 19 at this point. So yeah, I smoked at the time. So like I go to the news agents in the airport and I was like, "Can I get a lighter?" They're like, "That'll be $5." I was like,
money's not going to last very long.
And then I'm also like in Newark Airport, there's like a storm has just come in. I can see Manhattan like in the distance, and I'm like, my phone doesn't work. I just spent $5 on a lighter. I don't know how to get there. Oh my god. So I sit down, so I tried to get a phone card, and then that didn't work, and then the real panic starts to set in. So then I'm like, okay, I have my laptop. So I sit down beside this woman at like the seating area thing, and I open my laptop and I'm trying to get on the internet, and then it says that you need to have an American credit card. And I was like,
what have I done?
Oh, and I should mention as well, before this I actually went to like the information spot and was like, hey, how do I get to Manhattan? And she was just so rude and so kind of like just not helpful. She was like, you just get a bus. And I'm like,
oh yeah, obviously.
Where?
But yeah.
So I open my laptop, American credit card, and I just start bawling my eyes. I was like, oh my god. The woman beside me was like, are you okay? Do you need help and stuff? I was like, I'm fine. I only just got here and I need to get Manhattan and I have to get a bus. And she's like, okay. So she lets me use her phone to like call my dad and stuff to let them know that I'm safe. She physically like takes me to the bus. She's like, I'm gonna get a bus to Manhattan too. It's a good job she did, because the bus was 2 hours late. So
yeah, you'd have been like, what the fuck is going on? Right?
So she gets on the bus with me, and she was she had to go beyond my stop. And yeah, she was brilliant. I have her on Facebook and everything. I say like happy holidays and stuff to her every every year. Just to be like, I haven't forgotten about you. You're wonderful.
That's great.
Yeah.
And so you get on stage at Blip, and the New Yorkers always put on a warm welcome.
Yeah.
And I remember when I played it, it was quite breathtaking. The rock and roll atmosphere.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
Yeah, it was the same thing. Like I was like, it was so nerve-wracking because like I had to open the show.
Well, that's a big responsibility actually. It's maybe the hardest slot actually.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, no, like I get on and then I was just like, I think I had a couple of like mishaps. I had brought my Chaos pad with me and it was going to be the first time that I actually used it live, and then I hit something and then it was like re-triggering like what was just playing, and I was like, oh, and I just like disconnected. I was like, okay, we're not using that.
Yeah, it's very chiptune.
Yep. But yeah, it was amazing. Went down a treat. People seemed to really enjoy it and stuff. So yeah, I had a great time.
The good thing about playing first is you get to enjoy all the other shows and drink or smoke or whatever you want to do as well.
Yeah, I didn't drink alcohol in the VIP section.
Yeah, I guess you couldn't have done at that time.
I wasn't drunk every night.
Excellent. So you mentioned you were doing some releases on like Myspace and Bebo and stuff. So at some point you released your Super Hexagon, which I think would be fair to say is like what the album which people most associate with you. What do you think it is about Super Hexagon that people like so much?
So the game is quick. So it's like the whole essence of the game is that you have to survive for 60 seconds. So, you know,
Can only last 60 seconds. Yeah.
Anyone with like determination is going to go, I can do that. And, you know, 2 hours later, still haven't completed it. But yeah, it's just like, it's a really challenging game. And the music that so the way that the music had actually worked was that I'd already put some music out on releases or up on SoundCloud. Terry Kavanagh came across it. It was like, I love this. Can I use this in my game that I'm making? So that's kind of how it worked. He he programmed the music.
So they were individual tracks, like singles at that point, and he picked the ones he thought would fit in. And then you released a soundtrack album.
Yeah. So some of it was just stuff that had been on SoundCloud, so it hadn't been released before. Excuse me. And yeah, I think the kind of vibe that I had been going for was just very standard, like what like a lot of my music is like, where it's progressive and like kind of unfolds over time. So that really worked in the sense where, you know, it's a 3 or 4 minute piece or whatever, but it plays repeatedly over 60 seconds. So there's something about like people wanting to get to a certain part of the song that keeps the focus Focus lol is one of the tracks that keeps people kind of like wanting to get through the whole level because they want to hear the whole thing.
Do you still enjoy listening to it? Do you still play it live?
Yeah, I don't really get tired of it, to be fair. But I'm a bit like that with my own music. I wouldn't release something that I'm not vibing off, you know. So
no, I hate listening to my own music.
Do you?
Oh yeah, I do, because you listen to it so much when you're working on it, and inevitably you're creating some kind of sculpture, and then it's done. At least for me, and then it's like, okay, ship it, and then I forget about it.
I do that too, to an extent. I think that's right. So like, I wouldn't just sit and listen to like my own music. Like I wouldn't just sit and listen to the Super Hexagon EP, you know, at home or anything. It's just like when I play it live, I'm kind of like,
you have to hear it.
And I mean, you've got the whole experience where it's like through a sound system and you've got a crowd and everything. So that just kind of keeps reaffirming, you know, just keeps giving me that sweet validation that I need.
So the Super Hexagon soundtrack led into your current job, really, didn't it? So how did you make that switch?
So I was in my second year of university whenever Super Hexagon was released, I think, or my third. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, so yeah, then I came out of university with this, like, you know, people had like a huge respect for the game and also a huge respect for me as a composer. And I'm like, okay, lovely, thank you. University I did audio technology. And
very useful.
Yeah, it was great, but I don't think I didn't feel like I was ready to step into a role as a composer. But I did it anyway, self-employed. And yeah, so then after that it was just a bit of a trial and error of me learning how to make music that isn't just LSDJ, and also trying to navigate the ins and outs of self-employment and freelance, and yeah, it's definitely been a trip.
How long have you been a game composer for?
7, 8 years, I think.
What do you think the differences in approach are? Writing a chiptune banger versus writing a video game type of soundtrack?
It's kind of like restrictive in a good way. There's a couple, right, so the pros of it are that like people set deadlines, so I have to get the work done. There's that. But then you also have to kind of fit yourself into like somebody else's narrative and somebody else's idea. Sometimes you get like complete freedom, and that's a lot of fun. But sometimes it's like, we want this very specific thing, and then you have to find a way to make your own little, have your own little unique spin on it. But how do I put it? It's like if I have a project that I'm really excited about, then it's amazing. If I'm kind of just doing projects to get by, and you know, it's stuff that I've already kind of done before, like I'm not massively into that. I'd rather have like a challenge and have something like totally different to be working towards. But yeah, I mean, it's really exciting.
Do you think it's changed your relationship to music now that you're dependent on it for money? Do you still have that joy?
Yes and no. It's like I think it's just because it's something that used to be like a hobby and a release, and it can still be that, but it's like I don't get a say anymore in when it's like fun.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I've spent probably a good part of my like life over this career writing music every single day, and it's just like if it's working, it's great, but if it's just like a trial and error process of me being like, what about this? I'm not scrap it. What about this? And scrap it. And then you're kind of like, and it gets, it can be a little bit frustrating, but when you find it, you know, when you find the right concept, and then you get all the momentum and all the energy of like, yes.
You still get that.
Yeah, that's very addictive. So.
Oh, that's good to hear. We just had a little mess about in the studio, and you know, I sense the way you make music is quite intuitive, and you just have a natural feeling for things. So what kind of choices of like gear do you have when you're kind of working on like a game soundtrack? How do you decide how you're going to work?
Everything is a little bit of a voyage. It's just like a little bit explorative until I kind of find it, if that makes sense. So Dicey Dungeons is a very good example of this, where we were on strict deadline constantly. We were also in early access, so there had to be constant updates. I was also doing all the sound effects, so like it was a lot at once. But because sound effects was the thing that I wasn't super confident in, that was the thing I wanted to focus on first, but I still had to have music in the game to show progress and stuff. So I was just like, you know, doing little like quick kind of ideas and stuff in LSDJ with, I had no intention that like this was going to be the final music or anything, but we still had to go to conventions and stuff and show off the game, and so there's people kind of got a little bit attached to the music that was in there, and I was like, but it's like in the back of my head constantly just being like, no, it's not what I want. I want it to be more jazzy and more like funky, and then I'm sitting, you know, racking my brain being like, how am I gonna do this? Like so what I ended up doing was taking all the LSDJ stuff, chopping it, and then just like, you know, finding every saxophone and horn and stuff sample that I could find in my extensive sound sample library, which I'd never used, chopping that up, and then like adding a little bit of like jazzy elements, funk elements, French house and stuff, and then it just sort of became its own entity within like 2 months before we released it, which made Terry Kevin very nervous.
Yeah.
So, like 2 months before, I'm like, I'm changing everything, and he's like,
Really?
I was like, no, just trust me. So.
Yeah, because your soundtracks aren't all purist chiptune. I mean, they can't be anyway.
No.
What type of synths or plugins do you like to like?
I really like hardware, mostly just because it's like I hate, sitting at a screen and clicky and just automation and everything to do with MIDI. I'm like, it's so boring. Like anything where I have to just be like fine control, I would much rather go over to like a synth and just be like, messing on it, recording it. I would rather record like me messing with something for 2 hours and find gold within it than have like that complete control. Because like I still like to have a little bit of a human element in things. But yeah, gear, I don't know, I've kind of gathered. So the JP 8000 was my first
trance heritage. Yeah.
So it was the first synth I bought for myself. My actual first synth was a Christmas gift from my parents.
Oh, that's nice.
It was a microKORG.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool as well.
Bless them, they hunted down for that thing. I still have it. But yeah, so JP 8000 was my first synth, and then, oh god, what did I get then? Okay, I'll just tell you what I have. That's
yeah, sure.
So JP 8000, which is personal use. I don't think that's ever gonna be a part of video game stuff, but you never know. I think I might have used a little bit of it in Dicey Dungeons. I don't know.
I think the next game needs a big super saw breakdown.
Yeah, it should. And then I have a Prophet 6.
Oh wow.
Which is just brilliant for everything. Like, I love the sound of that. I use that a lot for sound effects for Dicey Dungeons. And then I have a Waldorf Quantum, which is not messing around and is so in depth that I haven't even scratched the surface with it yet. I keep just looking at it and being like, wow, it can do everything, and yet I do nothing with it. And then I have a bunch of Eurorack stuff, which is, again, like, that sits me down to the ground because it's all just kind of like, ooh, what does this do? Ooh, what does this do? And record the whole thing. I'm not really the kind that's gonna go over to any sort of machine with a plan.
And what do you do then? You chop up these parts and you use Logic or Ableton or something like that?
Ableton, yeah. I used to use Logic. I would have used Logic for like batch conversions and like finer editing and stuff like that. So I used Logic for sound effects and stuff with Dicey. Yeah.
So I guess it sounds like you might not describe yourself as a gearhead, well, other than the JP 8000. But on the other hand, you've got really nice stuff. Is there anything that you're trying to hunt down?
I just got a rack mount. Mostly just to kind of, because I have like my sound card and stuff, and now I want to have like more control with all my MIDI stuff. Even though I hate MIDI, but I'm prepared. And then I just have this big empty rack, so
you need to fill it with some things then. What project are you working on at the moment? What's going to come out soon? Any dates that we might be able to get?
Probably early 2021.
Okay, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's a really cool project that I never would have thought that I would be involved in, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, but I'm excited.
Let's talk a bit more about the sexism and stuff that you've experienced, because I think in the chiptune scene and actually the wider world, I think there's a real movement to not accepting this type of shit that people have had to go through in the past. And I'm sorry that you experienced that, but on the other hand, it's kind of like a fuck you to those early haters, because now you're a successful soundtrack composer. So if someone out there is going through that type of thing, what would you say to them?
I was going to first of all make a joke, which is a little bit relevant and is 100% true. You can get very far by being fueled on spite, but it will drain you. You will need to find another motivator. It's just, literally, it's so much noise that you do not need to just do whatever it is that you're doing. Like, just, it's like, I don't want to just be like, oh, don't listen to the haters, because that's such cliche, but it's kind of true. It's just, trust your gut, trust your own instinct, trust that you have something special, and trust that you have every right to just have fun like everybody else, because that's all that this really should be at the end of the day. Is just like, if I want to sit down and mess around with a Game Boy or a drum machine and record it, you know, and put it on the internet, why is that any different to every other fucker that does it, you know? You have a right to exist.
I think everyone has a right to freedom of expression. Is there any artists on the chiptune scene right now who you like, especially you think people should check out?
Like definitely everybody in a bit of chiptune is like really exciting me, because they have so that whole entire collective. First of all, like the live streams that were being pushed with Brain Infinite Lives.
Yes.
And then there were a lot of other ones popping up, and I don't want to list them all, but I do see you. Just that whole kind of thing where it was pushing 50% to the artists and 50% to a good cause. That is better than some actual official games events that were requesting me to play.
Yes.
So that's pretty groundbreaking, and that's something that I'm really excited. Like, I want to see that trajectory kick off and continue. Artists wise, like, just there are women that have had to fight to exist in this scene, more so than I ever did, because the culture seemingly got way more toxic.
They're being loud as well, which they should be.
Yes.
But people don't like it.
No, people are never gonna like it. There is a change. We've already witnessed a change, and it's a good shift.
I think my favourite artist last year was Cyanide Danson, Marie. I find her stuff super energetic.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
And my favourite artist this year is Breakbeat Heartbeat. And I don't know if it's chance or not, but they're obviously both women, and you know, absolutely great. So I have zero tolerance for people who just want to push minority groups to the side, because it's just excluding some of our best musicians, I think.
Well, so this is where the conversation gets a little bit like, kind of like, so people who are in chiptune that are men that never have to witness this sort of stuff will always kind of go like, oh, but it's just the bad guys. There seems to be this kind of like, oh, there's a bad guy and there's a good guy and there's no in between. But the thing is that, like, take for example, when I went into the Chipwin community and was sort of highlighting some issues, I felt what it was like to be a part of that community, because I was going in as Niamh Houston, not as Chipzel. And I had so many guys coming along and being like, I think you just need to like go and take your ideas elsewhere.
Oh, wow.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, like you sound like someone who isn't very familiar with this scene and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like,
wow, interesting. Okay.
So I got a real sense of like, and this was only over a 24-hour period. I got a real sense of what it was like to be more active in the current community. It's a shame that everything went down the way that it did, and it wasn't my intention for the whole thing to implode, but like the just the tone in which people speak to you when they see that you're a woman is so like,
it's condescending. At the very least.
Immediately condescending. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I take issues, that it's like you need to change, like it's not, there are so many people that I respect as musicians that are men in the scene or whatever, that's like, it's going to take them a while to get it, because there does seem to be this kind of like bad guy, good guy thing, and you're like, no, just listen to what people are telling you. You don't need to do anything about it. Like, this isn't going to change overnight. You just need to sort of listen and support and recognize that this is a thing.
I think I agree with that, and I think I'm guilty myself of thinking everyone in chiptune's lovely, because that's generally my experience, although occasionally I have had some negative comments, but really not for a while. But like some of these revelations are pretty bad, and my eyes have just been open to all of this. The last thing I want to talk about is the M word, money. So this is something that you and I have had disagreements about before. I don't want to talk about my opinions about money and music, because
it's easy for someone like you who has a job where you don't need to rely on it to say, oh, well, I can just give my work away for free because it's just a hobby. But that attitude is exactly what affects actual, like, you know, people who want to make a career in this. So I think especially about, you know, the change for me whenever I was like 16 or something, like my dad's a businessman, so like he's immediately like, you should make albums and you should sell them and stuff, and I'm like, okay. And like I managed to make a bit of money, and like that's really nice when you're like, you need that, you need to go, oh, I could actually, like, you know, I was 17 years old and I managed to make like £500 from selling albums.
Really good,
yeah. And you know, that's a lot of money when you're 17 years old, and that's it, like, and that's a lot of money like at any point. When
especially back then as well, right?
And that's enough to kind of give you that confidence. So it wasn't the money, but it was the feeling of independence and the feeling of freedom and the feeling like that I could actually create my own path. You know, and money has to be involved in that, because you have to have that security and that stability. And there are people in the scene right now that have every right to have that as their career path as well. And this is why it's like, it's a personal choice. It's like, fine if you don't want to sell your stuff, but I think the norm should be switched to sell your stuff and not, you know, this is, everything should be free, because you're going to end up with, like, even people who have full-time jobs or whatever, you still have every right to make money off of this thing, because you still put the time in, you know?
And you mentioned earlier this new paradigm shift with the online streaming and the innovation that Infinite Live and a bit of Chiptune made with the donations, because I'm quite used to real life chiptune events, like not having much money and they might pay expenses, and quite often the promoter loses money even if they do that, so it's like kind of hard for everyone, but we do it too because we love it, we want to keep the scene alive. Do you think these streams might be a way into making this more profitable?
I think so. So a couple of things. The stream, one thing I will say though, first of all, is that I think the streams need to figure out a way to make money for themselves as well for this to be viable. So I think there should be a Patreon that you can support as well. Or maybe even if it goes like 50, 25, 25, or I don't know, you know, split it some way where the ones that are hosting the stream, because they deserve to make money too. But the thing that excites me about streams is that it's so much easier for everyone to access. Like, you know, first of all, you have all these people, for example, someone tweeted at me saying like, I don't enjoy live music, like I don't like, it's too much noise and it's too stressful for me, but I was finally able to come to one of your shows and it felt amazing. And like, so there's things like that. It also, there's so much more variety. You can have a wider range of artists, and you don't have to worry about this like theme of like the club night that tends to be the reason why chiptune gets so saturated. actually, in that, I've spoken to a couple of people who ran events, and it's changed the conversation to be like, the setting is the problem, not the artist. We don't need to have every chip show be at a club.
Yeah.
Why don't we have chip shows that are outside, you know? And just like we have chill vibes, and we have like hype vibes, and then we have like, you know, the weird vibes and themed nights and stuff like that. And the live streams gives a good, sort of like what Last FM was for me, discoverability. That kind of like people can go on and be like, you know, they can find an artist that they really like because it's like a showcase, right? And then I would like to think that that is going to inspire more events as well, because it's not going to be this kind of like, oh, does anyone know any female?
That is a question that sometimes does get asked. I've discovered loads of great artists with these streams from countries
same.
I never even really investigated for, like all the South American stuff, and
Big time.
it's super good.
Yeah, and the fact that don't have to pay for travel costs and stuff gives at least like a little bit of like,
That balances it out a lot, I think.
yeah. I want to see the live streams continue, even, you know, if the live events start up again. I would like to see both.
The interesting thing is that a stream will make more money than a real life event. So maybe it's like the streams are subsidised. I don't know what the model will be. It's very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I don't really know I've never tried to run a live event, so I can't really speak from experience or anything, or what I think best practice is, because I know it's hard. That's the other thing.
It is.
And I can understand why things got saturated to just be about hype, because they want to get people in the door, and they want to know that there's going to be like reliable as in like known performers that draw a crowd and get people excited or whatever. So I get it, but you know, it's just a matter of like, how do we recognize the problem and then fix it?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And I think definitely a big part of it is setting. So you can get like...
That's very true. I think the first thing you think about is electronic music. Oh, it has to be in a club.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a rave.
With alcohol.
Yeah. And then, you're right, that immediately limits it to a certain kind of music, and it doesn't have to be, you could just show in an art gallery and make it quite experimental.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've played my fair share of those, and they're weird, but interesting.
Do you have any final messages for people?
Good luck. I hope that if we go into second lockdown that it's not too strenuous, that you can find, if you're a musician, that you can find some therapeutic, creative vibes and get stuck in. That's kind of what I would like to see a lot from everybody right now, is new music. And get it out, release it. I'm trying myself. I know the hang up, but I just want to see the scene be super loud and visible, because it's still that locked door that nobody seems to know about, where it's like there's so much talent, there's so many good people, there's so many helpful people. It's got a really good heart, you know, at the core, even though, you know, we've got a bit of shady characters and that, but for someone else to discover all of this is it's gonna be interesting, I think.
I mean, it's changed our lives.
Literally.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks so much for repeating our chat. Actually, it was completely different.
It was different, we did it.
Great.
Well, I was super pumped after filming that with Chipzel. I hope you'll follow her advice and get into the studio and make some tracks. If you could subscribe to the channel, that would be fantastic. And don't forget to check out some of Chipzel's music. Thanks a lot, and see you in another video soon. Take care.